This is the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast, the podcast where we look at our generation, look at our times through the lens of faith and leadership, character, and history. It's great to have you with us. Let's dive in. As I'm recording in our Nashville studios, Los Angeles is a bit of a war zone. You know what's been happening. President Trump decided to send ICE in and to remove people who were in the country illegally, do it forcefully if necessary. Obviously, there was great opposition, great violence, so President Trump nationalized the California National Guard, as he has the authority to do, and had them pressing the case, keeping order, and helping ICE. That also did not work well. More violence, cars set aside, people beaten up, violence, insane things going on. So the president, as he said he would, has sent units of Marines in there. So thousands of Marines now are descending upon L.A., and they will reinforce the California National Guard, who in turn are reinforcing ICE. And all of this is about removing immigrants that Donald Trump and his administration want removed from the country. Now, I want to use this as an example of a way of thinking. Those of you who listen to this podcast often, you know that what I'm focused on a lot is the way we think, how we perceive public policy, how we are able to ponder two thoughts at the same time and move beyond the incendiary politics of our time. So it's not enough in this situation, with immigration being such a huge issue in our times, it's not enough to just be pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I'm weary to death of a lot of our media coming down on one side or the other, okay? I realize that the issues can land you pro or contra Trump on certain issues, but you can't just be pro everything that Donald Trump wants to do or anti everything that Donald Trump wants to do. That's not enough. That's not smart. That's not going to lead to answers. That's just thinking of politics basically the way you think of a football game. I'm for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm against the Dallas Cowboys. Fine in a sports bar, not working in D.C. or in our voting or in our thinking about our national life. Okay, so you can't just be pro-Trump or anti. You also can't be pro or anti-immigration. Think about that now, because some of you are. You can't just be pro or anti-immigration. Now, there are some things that are obvious. We obviously don't want other countries dumping their criminals in our country because we've had a ridiculous immigration policy, particularly under the Biden administration, which basically had open doors. You don't want to have criminals dumped in your country. You don't want to have an El Salvadoran, Venezuelan criminal gang dumped in your country. You don't want to have security dangers because you're allowing foreign spies and security threats into the country, quite obviously. But you can't just simply be pro or anti-immigration because, quite frankly, every nation needs immigrants. I'll come back to that in just a moment. Every nation needs immigrants, not just because if they're going to be a great nation, they have to allow humanitarian immigration, but also because they need the help. They need the input. You should sometimes Google what immigrants have brought to America. I'm talking about specific scientists, specific medical people, specific military commanders, specific business builders, etc. Every nation needs immigrants. They need the influx of brain power. They need the energy. They need the strength. They need the labor. And I'll talk to you about that in just a moment. So some people are just blankly anti or pro immigration. Let's close the borders. Let's open the borders. Let's open them a little bit, etc. You just can't think in terms of being pro or contra immigration as a whole. That's ridiculous. It's as ridiculous as being pro or contra Trump on every issue and letting that decide how you think of your politics. Now, let me show you why a wiser way is necessary. We're going to have to get beyond the violence. We're going to have to get beyond pro and contra Trump. We're going to have to get beyond pro and contra immigration and think this thing through because, let me say it, and it's going to shock some of you, immigration is essential to our national future. It's essential to our national future, more so than ever. If you listen to this podcast at all, you know that I pay a great deal of difference to demographics. What's the birth rate in a country? What's the population growth? What's the trajectory of a country, etc.? And I'm concerned about this issue, particularly as regards the United States, but quite frankly, all over the world. Here's the broad truth, and that is that population is declining all over the world. Very few nations have population growth. Instead, population is declining around the world, and that's largely because of low birth rate, something we have done to ourselves. Some of it is kind of a UN limiting birth rates in high poverty areas. Some of it is, quite frankly, out and out racism, encouraging certain undesirable types, as Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, said, encouraging them not to have children. A lot of it has to do with cultural issues. There are certain generations, certain age groups that have very little interest in having children. We've not sold them on that. We've not celebrated family. We've not extolled the virtues of parenthood, of being a father, of being a mother, etc. Part of it, yes, gets laid at the door of the feminist movement, but not exclusively. So you have value shifting, you have UN policies, you have global population growth experts expounding their, I think, largely false ideas. You have an ideal of 2 children per family, etc. You've got generations, entire age groups that aren't interested in children, etc., etc., etc. So as a result, I think you know, because many of you listen to this podcast often, and so the number I want to stick in your brain is 2.1. A nation must have a birth rate of 2.1 to maintain its population. Obviously, it's got to have more than that to grow. If it has less than that, it's in decline. Okay? So for a long time, the United States did very well. It had a nose hair above 2.1, and it did well. But just recently, I mean in the last 12 months, the report is in that the United States has a birth rate of 1.6. By the way, we only had 2.1 because of Hispanic birth rates. Broadly speaking, Black birth rates, African American birth rates, are twice that of whites, and Hispanic are 5 times that of whites. And so we were maintaining a healthy population growth largely because of the Hispanic birth rate. Even the Hispanic birth rate is declining now. Black certainly is. White certainly is. So now the United States is at 1.6. Now, what does that mean? That means we are in decline. We are in decline as a people. Over time, we will not replace our population. We will shrink. Okay? Very important for us to know this. And by the way, let me say what's obvious about population subjects, and that is once a population trend goes forward and is not corrected, it is going to happen. You can't fix a population growth issue. You can't suddenly start having new births that fix the hole in your population chart that you're going to have in 20 years. Obviously, I mean, this is all very, very obvious. So what's the best way to fix a declining population if people aren't having children? Yeah, you can start to change minds. Yeah, you can start to extol large families. Yeah, you can start to shift those values. That's hard. That takes time. And it hasn't proven immensely successful, quite frankly. You know, if we're killing the next generation in abortion, what's the big deal about not having those babies in the first place? And I will tell you, I've had young people look me right in the face and say exactly that. So all of that to say that we in the United States, which is my focus at the moment, we are in decline. Almost every nation in the world is in population decline. And what that means is that immigration is going to be valued. Immigration is essential. China is a country I often point to. They had a one-child policy, absolutely absurd. That made the country families favor males who could take care of the parents in their older age and do more work and what have you. So they've got a completely lopsided population chart. They are in trouble. In fact, I know economists who are fairly level-headed, and they say China's done. We may be talking about them militarily. We may be talking about them from landmass perspective. We may be talking about their vicious politics and their vicious military actions, but they're done. They will not survive as a nation. Now, The answer, of course, is that they might survive in terms of immigration, but who wants to live in China who doesn't already live there? And second of all, you can't fix it with immigration alone. In the U.S., we don't have a severe problem. So we need a healthy immigration policy. Let me just say it out loud. A lot of people in D.C. listen to this podcast. We don't have a good immigration policy. I work extensively with the Kurds. I believe the Kurds are our allies. They're people we want in the United States. They're people we want to bring in, especially when there are wars and conflicts where they are threatened. We want these people here, hard workers, devoted, love America, pro-free market, etc. Yes, 95% Muslim people, but let's not be bigoted about that religion. It's extremist Islam, violent Islam, which is our problem, not moderate Islam, which is where the Kurds are. All that to say, you can't believe what they have to deal with in terms of getting into the country. I have worked with some of these people and helped and watched and monitored and even testified regarding their immigration process. It can take years. And these are people who fought at our side. These are people we're at peace with. And so the silly Biden policy makes it hard on the Kurds, but then welcomes gang members from Latin America. This is how silly it all is. What we need is a sane policy. And if we had a path to immigration, a healthy immigration, if we had a good path to citizenship, we would be a healthy country. We're not going to be able to do it by birth rates alone. So we need a wise immigration policy. We need to be bringing in smart people. We need to be putting them in our universities. We need to be bringing in people of certain gifts and certain abilities. Yes, laborers at the lowest level, so to speak. I think work is noble, so I don't like to think of it as low level. But yeah, just common laborers, so to speak, as the economists say. But yeah, we need to be bringing in people going to law school, and people are going to stay here and innovate, and people are going to be entrepreneurs, and people who are gifted in the sciences. We need vast technicians and vast computer experts and vast people in the tech industry. Absolutely. Let's go. Let's not be racists and bigoted. Let's bring these people in, but let's bring them in through a path that has been wisely thought through and where there's a path to citizenship. We've got to have this in our country because we are in decline. I expect, quite frankly, that the next time we hear what the birth rate is in the United States, it's going to be below 1.5. This is red alert status. So again, while we're talking about the Marines and talking about nationalizing the National Guard and sending in ISIS and everything's big drama, got to be done ham-handed, got to be done with the camera showing, everything's got to be, like a bunch of drama queens. That's the way our politics is often conducted. What we're not paying attention to, and it's very obvious we're not paying attention to it because Congress has nothing underway to fix immigration. We end up with a stupid policy under Biden. And now, wise intention in the sense that we're trying to deal with people who shouldn't be in the country in the first place. But I'm talking about in the Trump administration. But the ultimate solution is not just to kick everybody out, but to realize that we need a wise plan. Where's the wise plan that good people can come into the country through or with or according to and thus become citizens? Let me give you an example of our problem. Donald Trump says he's got about 500,000 people he wants to kick out of the country. These are people from El Salvador, people from Haiti, people from Venezuela. A lot of them were allowed in the country on a humanitarian basis. They were refugees from oppression. Many of them stayed. They overstayed their welcome, like the Egyptian who killed a number of Jews and was literally using a flamethrower in Colorado. This guy had permission to come in the country, and then he overstayed his welcome. Nobody monitored. Nobody knew where he was. And here now he's killing people. And again, radical Islam, anti-Jew, and look what it does to our society. This guy needs to go. He needs to go now. He shouldn't have been allowed to overstay his welcome, and he should have been sent back a long time ago. My point is that we've got, Trump says, 500,000 people who need to go. And I want you to think about that. America is approximately 3.3 million people. You send out 500,000 people, that's a lot of folks. That's a lot of folks. And we obviously need the criminal element to go, but those who are workers, those who want to go to college, those who want to be American citizens, we need them. We need them. They can help turn this population chart. So some of you are sometimes write me and you are kind, but you're a little sometimes frustrated with what I say. And the reason is that I'm not falling neatly into two opposing categories. Right now, I'm criticizing Biden. I'm also criticizing Trump. And I'm saying that we do need immigrants to come in, but come in the right way. Well, that's not a perspective that's much out there. It's not one that's being touted. It's not one that we're arguing about. It's not one that's being spoken of on the cable news scream fests. But it's what we need to do. Kick out the evildoers, kick out the criminals, kick out the ones that were from El Salvador and mega prisons and got dumped on us to save them money by an ill-intentioned regime there. Perhaps allow those who were here for humanitarian reasons, who have behaved themselves and worked hard and are going to college, etc., allow them to stay, but give them a path to citizenship and a path to permanence. And then for heaven's sakes, don't have open borders. Don't just violently start removing people by the half millions at a time, but establish a path to citizenship. By the way, I think English ought to be the official language. I think they ought to be required to learn English, and I think that we ought to require a knowledge of American history and culture, just the same things that happened earlier in our history. Otherwise, you've got foreign nations living in islands and little regions in our country. You've basically got reservations. Having some connection to Native American history, I care about that, and I don't think it works. I don't think it's wise. So let me be very, very clear. I'm with Donald Trump on removing the evildoers, the criminals, the ones who have broken the law, the ones who need to go. It's very obvious who they are. I don't know why that means everybody who's been allowed in the country from Latin America for humanitarian reasons. But I certainly understand we need a corrective on the ridiculous Joe Biden policy. And it was Joe Biden. It wasn't Congress, wasn't Supreme Court. Joe Biden, his administration, stupid policy. And by the way, the Democrats have to own a lot of this. I usually am not bashing one side or the other, but the Democrats basically are trying to let a lot of people in the country who they know are going to vote Democrat. And that's why you see them with urging open borders and then turning right around and trying to let anybody who lives in a given region in the United States vote. Well, only American citizens should vote. But what's this plan? Let's get as many people in the country as possible who are going to have as many needs as possible. Therefore, they're going to vote Democrat as much as possible because they're not going to understand the free market power of uplift. So they're going to be looking for government handouts. This is what Democratic Party, much of it, not all of it, trades in. So this becomes the policy. This was definitely the policy of the Biden administration, and they knew that ultimately it was about votes. It wasn't what was best for those immigrants. It wasn't what was best for the country. It wasn't what was best for the U.S. citizens. It devalues U.S. citizenship. So we got a problem. But very few people are actually working the problem. We're all up in arms with our hair on fire about California, L.A. basically. We're all up in arms with our hair on fire about Joe Biden. We're all up in arms with our hair on fire about whether we're pro or contra Trump, pro or contra immigration. But what we're not doing is working the problem and fixing a plague on our national life, which is our low birth rate, with a wise immigration policy. Where is that? Are you insisting on that with your congressman or senator? Are you insisting on that in your locality? This is what we must do because we love our country, because we want to assure a future for our children, and because, quite frankly, there are good people in the nations who want to be good American citizens. And everybody here, unless you're Native American, you're the downstream of immigration, probably a much smarter immigration than we have now.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator in international media. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.